Thank you all so very much give me 1 second, y'all. Sorry, y'all. I was having a little instability. Hey, Marianne. So I'm really excited to be here tonight to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is environmental justice. But one of the things that we constantly see coming up, and we're hearing whether we're on the streets or we're at candidates forums, is this conversation around the AI revolution that is happening. And people are concerned about it. Some people are just intrigued and curious. But I do think that it is an important topic for your congressional representative to be speaking about, to be well versed in. Even me, I'm not going to pretend like I am an expert in artificial intelligence and AI. But I am learning every single day because in a lot of ways, very similar to when the internet was introduced to the public. People didn't quite know what the internet was, how it worked. And then there were things on the internet that folks learned needed to be regulated and needed to be watched and monitored. And I think that that same topic is true for AI. This is not just a conversation about environmental justice or AI. This is a conversation about our local economy, how it impacts it. This is a conversation as somebody who has the background as an organizer and who lives on a frontline community like the West Side of Chicago. The question that I have when I see something like this being introduced to my community is who is paying the price for this and who is profiting off of this? And those are questions that we have to keep at the forefront of our mind. The environmental justice fight is one that has gone on forever, and it is ever increasingly growing, evolving, and I'm very proud to see where the environmental justice space is as it becomes more intersectional. And I think that Illinois 7 is a perfect, starting place and ground and could serve as a national model about how we truly implement true environmental justice for the country, given the demographics in Illinois 7, how racially diverse we are, how economically diverse we are, in the terrain of Illinois 7, which used to be a manufacturing hub, and what that could look like. And so I thank y'all for joining me. Y'all could be anywhere spending your evening, but you decided to listen to me run my mouth. So thank you very much. Also, I will just say this in case I miss it, I probably won't at the end, but if folks have to hop, early voting has started in the district. Um, Hundreds of people already in the western suburbs cast their votes today. And then in the city, we had thousands of people who've cast their votes. And so this is a very exciting time for Illinois 7 because, as most of you know on the call, we are getting a new congressional representative in our district. And so please, please, please tell your friends, your loved ones, your neighbors, your grocery clerk, your postal service person to get out the vote and make sure that they have a plan to vote. I would love your vote, but even if it's not for me, I want to see people get out the vote. So, we are going to get started, and I know that Nicole wanted to kick us off and start off with some questions. If folks just want to drop in the chat what part of the district they're in, if they're not in the district and just happen to hear about this, we welcome you as well. But while we're doing that, Nicole, if you want to go ahead and get started with some of the questions.
Sure. All right, the first one that I have is how do you plan to keep energy costs from rising with new data centers set to be built in Illinois?
This is a huge issue in the city of Chicago and across the state of Illinois. And the environmental justice groups have been in quite the fight in affordability groups, right, that fight for affordable living, have been in some fights with companies like ComEd who have monopolized the ability for how energy is brought out through our district. Um, we, first of all, the first thing that the pledge and the promise that I could make to the voters in this district is that I won't accept a dime of corporate PAC money from these energy companies that they have very powerful lobbies that come to Washington, D.C., and they declaw and, quite frankly, neuter the ability for our Congress to hold them accountable for their actions, particularly in a lever that we have on the federal level around congressional hearings. So, number one, we need to bring a lot of these CEOs to the front of the classroom, and we need to ask them, one, why are these monopolies growing across, our country? And number two, um, why are they jacking up the prices for energy and not being held account for those? So this is a regulation conversation that can happen on the federal level, but I think that it starts with your representative not being bought and paid for by a lot of these lobbyist groups. Um, I would also say that the data centers, which is a piece of the question that got brought up, are being established and built in some of these communities without community benefits agreements, right? This is going to require a lot of work, on the state level and on the county level, with current sitting elected officials and our office working very closely with them. Um, we do see exorbitant prices for energy in communities like the West Side and South Side, and places like Maywood and Bellwood. I think when you compound that with the fact that sometimes upwards of 60% of people's paychecks are going towards rent, that does not include, or mortgage, that does not include utilities in the fold. Um, it's crushing for a lot of families across this country. And so I think that, we have to have the political courage to regulate these companies, but we also cannot just let the data centers move in without community input. And it's going to require us to work very closely on the state level and county level with sitting elected officials.
Absolutely. Which kind of leads me into the next, in regards to AI, and it's, what type of regulations do you support on the use of AI?
So, number one, I think that it's free reign right now. The regulations that I'm most concerned about is that the surveillance piece. We're seeing there are certain companies that are selling data and privacy information to entities, for example, like ICE, um, that are tracking and surveilling members in the community, in a district like ours that is immigrant heavy and traditionally and historically have dealt with things like surveillance, facial recognition. I'll talk about that later, but the surveillance piece in Black communities, Brown communities, I am very concerned about ICE getting their hands on that data. Um, and then data and privacy in general. Things like people are actually putting a lot of personal information in these AI bot chats, things like their credit card information, things like their addresses. There's a lot of personal information being put in. Some people, for example, when we talk about data and privacy, there are federal laws that already protect that, like HIPAA, for example. People are going to AI chat bots and asking about medical information or medical advice about things, and they are uploading a lot of their, once again, their personal information. And we know from HIPAA, obviously laws, that information can't be or should not be shared, particularly that pertains from hospitals and doctors and, the hospitals and the healthcare system giving that information out. But I think that those regulations have to be broadened out and expanded as technology grows and revolutionizes. And as a matter of fact, Chat GPT is actually creating a model specific. I think it's going to be called Chat GPT Med, because there's so many people coming to AI models and asking about healthcare symptoms and putting their very personal information in there. And so, data and privacy is the number one thing that I want to protect and regulate. Obviously, that includes personal information and it includes unfortunately, the surveillance that could happen in these communities and which entities get a hold to that data and what they'll do with that data. And so, I brought up a little bit earlier about the facial recognition. This has been kind of a long-standing issue that has occurred in the technological world, in the tech world, because a lot of coders of this software, for example, are not people of color. And so they don't have a lot of models or prototypes that can accurately depict through facial recognition or other types of technology, pick up in a sophisticated and efficient way people who have melanin in their skin, for example. And so law enforcement agencies have used this facial recognition technology. They've used it in places like Target and like Walmart to capture people who may have stolen merchandise, and then they arrest the wrong person because the prototypes that were built for this software are oftentimes built by people who are non-black people or non-people of color. Um, and they don't have enough prototypes that, like I said, in an efficient and accurate way can pick up facial recognition with people who have melanin in their skin. So those are things that I think that we could bring to the forefront of Illinois 7, right? And talk about in these congressional hearings, talk about or write even write legislation about and helping in the regulation process.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, at this point, something is better than nothing. So,
Mhm.
yeah, for sure. So I want to kind of go into a little bit more of environmental, and it has to do with housing as well. So, how do you balance environmental concerns with wanting to build new housing quickly to improve affordability? Is there a trade-off we need to make?
Um, Yeah, I mean, the trade-off needs to be that we should stop spending money for wars and we should invest it in housing. That's the
Hmm.
trade-off. I think that people constantly ask us to compromise on social good when we should actually be reevaluating how we expand portions of our fiscal budget that don't need to be expanded, which is why I'm actually very upset about what is happening in the Middle East right now, because we are constantly told to make these trade-offs and these concessions. Um, and it always comes with cutting entitlement programs like Social Security or Medicare or healthcare or education or housing, even though we know that housing is not an option. It is a necessity for humans. It is a number one social health determinant for people. And so the trade-off that I would like to see is that we slash the Pentagon budget and the military budget just by 10%. And that would help us fund um, a lot of the housing crisis that we have in the United States. And I do think that this is a conversation about how we shift into a green economy and green energy. One of the amendments that were added to the Green New Deal was about public housing in particular. And we know that a significant number of folks, thousands of people across Illinois 7, are recipients of HUD housing. And the current public housing that exists in our district, some of them have not been remodeled or touched in decades. And so people are living in homes that are not up to date. They are not ADA accessible. They are not energy efficient and they're not just safe to live in. They're not habitable to live in. And that extends to another issue in Illinois 7 that's it's unique to Illinois 7, our district, a part of other parts of the delegation. Some years back, a couple of years back, we had awful rain in the summertime and we had flooding on the west side and south side of the city of Chicago. And there are people that are in our community living in their house with black mold, The mold has not been scraped or cleaned out of their homes. Their homes have not been rehabilitated. FEMA has not come in to help. Do you know what our trade off was in the community? We had to put on hazmat suits and gloves and boots and rubber boots and go in there and scrape up and clean up the homes ourselves. And to me, that is unacceptable. And so, when I say that we should build in strong local economies, when we're talking about green energy, this is the investment that we're talking about. Um, Trades and vocations where people can be trained in carpentry and returning citizens, right? And in Illinois 7 who have dealt with recidivism and the criminal justice system that are looking for work, giving people high paying union jobs, livable wages to help us rebuild Illinois 7. There are tons of vacant lots and abandoned buildings across our district that could be utilized in a myriad of ways. I mean, Marianne, don't mean to pick on you, but I know that you do the gardens, the community gardens in Austin. These are not just spaces that are um, used to beautify the community, these are meditative spaces. This is trauma informed care. And it starts with nature and teaching people that through healing. And Marianne, I'm gonna have you talk about that a little bit, a
Sure.
little bit. But in terms of housing, Nicole, I think that there's a very strong argument to make in committees about the housing that needs to be built in Illinois 7 and how that could be a part of how we build a strong local green economy in the Illinois 7th congressional district. So I don't know. I hope I answered your question, but that is how I want to advocate and incorporate the environmental justice spaces that we can modernize public housing through HUD um, and transform the lives of thousands of Illinois 7 residents. Solar panels, once again, insulating the house with green products, right? And in these homes, um, we can create a workforce program through trades and vocations of how to build these energy efficient homes. We can beautify our communities and invest in trauma informed care through things like community gardens and neighborhoods by recapturing vacant lots and abandoned buildings. We can hold slumlords accountable for letting their properties rot essentially and be an eyesore to the community, which drives down our property value in the communities. And so I think the seed to all of this is there is a vehicle for us to do this and raise capital both privately and publicly, right? Through public funds, through the government. But I think that housing is probably the biggest economic engine for Illinois 7 when we start to talk about how do we incorporate environmental justice in a green economy and building up strong local economies in Illinois 7.
I 100% agree. And I just want to tell you, I always appreciate your thoughtfulness of the disabled and ADA community personally. Um,
Because how can we say that we want Medicare for all and universal
yeah,
health care? And we're not talking about people who live in public housing, for example,
yeah,
who it's not ADA accessible, but also there are a lot of family members who are giving long-term care for their family members in this housing, and there should be funds available. But I would also be remiss to not point out that our seniors are the ones who are suffering when we talk about this mold that has happened through these flooding, which by the way, the rainfall and the flooding is because the Midwest is underwater because of environmental crisis we're in. We are not doing enough to be preventative of these things. And I think that when we talk about centering environmental justice, whether it's through housing, the economy, healthcare, whatever it is, Nicole, we have to start with the most vulnerable populations of people. And I think that the disability community completely and consistently always gets left out.
yeah, I agree. Um, so in going with the Green Deal. Um, One of the other questions I have is how is a Green New Deal going to affect Illinois 7th Congressional District?
I mean, it's going to generate strong good union paying jobs with a livable wage. I think the number is 23 trillion with the T, y'all. $23 trillion will be generated in a 10-year span in the green energy economy and in industry. And so we have to say how much of that money is being invested back into frontline districts like Illinois 7. But the Green New Deal serves as a framework. I think when we talk about environmental justice, we just touched on this a little bit. Illinois 7, once again, is the best model to try to implement this because we are an immigrant heavy district. We are a plurality African American district. We are a supermajority women district in Illinois 7. And so there's so much opportunity for us to see how an investment through a Green New Deal. So, what does that look like, and what is that? That is the housing that we just talked about. That's our crumbling school infrastructure. We should modernize our schools. And we should also be training and put it. So when I talk about trades and vocations coming back into the school system, it's it is carpentry, it's plumbing, it's all of that, it's electricians, it's all of that, but it's also coding, right? Because technology is happening and it is growing. We're talking about AI, right? Our children should be competent to coding should be a language requirement. If you ask me, how our students should be trained in the same way that they believe students should be bilingual and should learn Spanish or Mandarin or another language or French, they should also learn the language of technology. And I think that there's a lot that we could do. We could close the wealth gap that exists in our district by equipping our students with these skill sets. And so, as I said, our schools are crumbling. They don't have the proper energy efficient infrastructure that they need. Our transportation and our multimodal system in Illinois 7, we have our district that is extremely public transit dependent and a very working class district at that. It takes about 30 minutes on average for people in our district to get from their home to their jobs. And we should be investing through a Green New Deal in high speed rails in our district. I think of infrastructure differently. I think we need to pave the sidewalks. So once again, those who are disabled, who have canes, who have wheelchairs, they have the ability to use the public transit. I think that we could use the Green New Deal to work with the Metropolitan Water Reclamation and beautify our district through community gardens and through park districts across Illinois 7 to give more recreation to Illinois 7. So I think that the opportunity to delve into a Green New Deal is endless. I think that it is absolutely endless of what we can do. But I think the biggest part is that we have to be realistic and we have to talk about the economics of it. And too often in districts like Illinois 7, which is a donor district, we pay more in federal taxes than we get back in federal taxes. We need a pit bull in appropriations to earmark this money specifically for the people in our district and to make the case that Illinois 7 has one of the largest death gaps in America between downtown and the south side and the west side. We have some of the largest lead piping issues on the west side and in the western suburbs. Some of the water in Illinois 7 is dirtier than water in Flint, Michigan. By the way, the water in Flint is still dirty, right? Um, so there is a case to be made for Illinois 7 about improving the quality of life, investing in the economic engine of the United States of America by keeping Chicago economically thriving. We are the Chicago seat in this delegation. And because we have a relatively young district where the median age is 35, we are contributing to the workforce and the economy in the United States. And so I think there's a moral argument to make, a fiscal argument to make, and a policy and legislative argument to be made in Illinois 7 for the Green New Deal.
I agree. It still astounds me that the median age is 35. It's like, wow, it's a young district. So I'm gonna leave this up to you. I have one more question, or do you want to go to our guest?
Yeah, why don't we answer one last question that was pre-submitted, and then we can go to the folks who are in here.
Okay, just to circle back around to AI. How will we protect workers from job displacement while ensuring the benefits of AI are shared broadly, not just concentrated amongst major tech companies?
Well, can you restate state that last part of the question, Nicole?
Yes, yes. Let me see. The benefits of AI are shared broadly, not just concentrated amongst major tech companies.
So, number one, regulations have to be put into place, and I cannot stress that enough, y'all. This can get out of hand very quickly in the same way that crypto got out of hand very quickly. And in particular, is that there are a lot of illicit markets out there that will utilize this technology, and a lot of nefarious folks who could get their hands on this data that could do us a lot of harm. I also would just like to lift this up that now that we are the aggressor going in very aggressively into the Middle East, we cannot take cyber attacks off of the table of the type of terroristic attacks that we may have exposed ourselves to, because the president wanted to usurp the power of Congress and unilaterally make a decision to do what he did. Um, so that is a concern of mine too. I didn't say that in the regulation piece about data and privacy, is that we have to be aware that cyber attacks is on the table. So, as far as how do we protect workers? Number one, I think we need to pass the Competes Act. And the Competes Act talks about bringing jobs back to the United States, but particularly an investment in manufacturing jobs. And so, when we talk about building a strong local economy, once again, Illinois 7 is a model for how that used to be. We used to be a manufacturing hub of the Midwest. And I think that we can bring that back. But we can only bring the Competes Act back if we pass the PRO Act, which is the ability for workers to unionize, collective bargain, and fight for their rights, both for workplace safety and hazard safety in these workplaces, but also to push back on major corporations that will try to monopolize if something like the Competes Act did get passed. And so I think that, our administration, once it's elected, we have to throw ourselves completely into labor and what labor has going on. And we have to fight tooth and nail and advocate tooth and nail once Democrats get the power back in the House to pass the PRO Act. There should not be a hiccup. If Democrats get the majority, it should not, it's gloves off. We got to pass things like the PRO Act. We have to pass things like the Competes Act and send it to the Senate and lobby and fight as hard as we can to get that passed into law. And essentially, we touched on this briefly about the community benefits agreements, but I think this is tied into the conversations of things like the PRO Act. We have to push the narrative that folks have to organize in their community. Once I get elected, I can't abdicate my responsibility as organizer in my community. You actually have to become organizer in chief of your community, right? And make sure that the neighbors, the precinct captains, the block club presidents are an accountability metric for a lot of these companies that will salivate at the opportunity to come and build data centers in Austin, in North Lawndale, in Garfield Park. I want to put this on everyone's radar who's on this call. Google is building the Googleplex at the old Thompson Center. So we're seeing it already. We're seeing it happen at rapid speed in Illinois 7. And when they build this Googleplex, which great, it will generate jobs. But who gets those jobs? It's not the unskilled worker who's not skilled in and doesn't know how to code. It's going to be people, they're going to import people from places like California and Silicon Valley who are very high skilled in things like coding. That's where we have things that's where the PRO Act comes in. That's where we talk about community benefits agreements, and that's where we throw down because yeah, you need those workers, but then what happens when those workers move here? They need housing, right? They need a place to live. Well, what's the closest place to the Thompson Center? 5 or 7 stops from the Thompson Center is the Laramie and Lake stop, which is my Green Line stop in Austin. The families are getting ready to be displaced. So this AI coming in and data centers going up and more technology centers like the Googleplex being built and urban settings like ours, it's not just that workers need to be protected, communities need to be protected, entire communities and neighborhoods need to be protected. And so I'm in the spirit that when we pass the PRO Act and we build up labor movements like Amazon and the Starbucks workers and UPS workers and CWA and UAW, the work that they're doing, it puts us in a position to train our community to also, you know, be preventative instead of reactive to being gentrified and pushed out of their community. So I think this expands beyond just having to um, protect the workers who and that are the AI is going to come in and people are automation is coming in to replace. I think it needs to be a movement across the board for working class people to be protected. Um, and then the final thing I'll say on that second half of the question is that we need to break up monopolies, and there should be, safeguards and guardrails put into place where one person is not able to monopolize the whole space. I mean, we're seeing the horrors of that through things like Meta, right? Facebook owns Instagram and Facebook, and they're creating meta glasses, and I mean they're taking over every aspect. We see it with Apple, right? And Alexa through Google. We know who the big tech players are because they're infiltrating their ways into our communities in all ways. And whether you are wearing an Apple Watch, you have an Alexa, you know, sound system, voice activated sound system, or you have a ring camera on your front doorstep, we are being surveilled and monitored, and our data is constantly being collected by about a handful of companies, right? And data is really the gold right now. It's not. I mean, if you have data, you are set up to be very wealthy and very powerful because there's a lot that you can do with that data. And so I think that that's a very long-winded response in saying that we need to pass the Competes Act to bring manufacturing jobs into our community. And then once we bring those manufacturing jobs in, we need to make sure that the PRO Act is passed so people can unionize, they can collective bargain, they can fight back, they can have safe workplace spaces, and then we can build relationship between those movements and movements happening in neighborhoods so people are not gentrified and pushed out of their communities. And we need to break up monopolies. I support that. And break up monopolies. And we need the ability to put safeguards and regulations in place so that a handful of companies are not responsible of holding all of our data. But the only way that y'all are going to be able to do that is if you elect a Democrat that is not corporate. Democrat that's being their coffers are being lined by very nefarious figures who are pushing for an agenda to not get those safeguards, regulations, and things put into place. So I
I
will sit there.
agree. No, you're good. I want to say you are right about it being everywhere. I have a 12-year-old nephew who has the Google VR. And yeah, it's and so it's like it permeates everywhere. And second of all, I just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to answer all those wonderful questions.
Thank you, Nicole. And then before we get in, I just like to highlight too and amplify. This is not an hyperbolic like conspiracy theory here. There are several class action lawsuits that have taken place from Google to Facebook of breaches of our data going out and being exposed to people. I mean, Cambridge Analytica in the race that happened in 2020 and 2016, where the Trump administration worked in tandem with people like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg to basically pump out propaganda through the campaign season. And why was Mark Zuckerberg able to do that? Because he owns everything. He owns all of the top social media platforms. And so I'm actually appalled at how much we don't talk about Cambridge Analytica in the case study of that, and how data was basically siphoned from people without their knowledge, weaponized against them, and then foreign agents were able to come in, like Russia in China, and they were able to cause all of these rifts and divisions on social media through propaganda. That really happened. That's not a conspiracy theory. And so it really concerns me. Like I said, when I like one company, whether it's Google or Apple, we're using the ring cam, we're using the meta glasses, we're using the iPads. I mean, phones are using voice activation to collect data that way. I mean, we're on Zoom, they're collecting data this way. And so it is quite scary. And it's something that as AI continues to revolutionize and it becomes larger than life, we do need to be concerned with. And so I mean, I would like to open the floor for any questions that people may have. And then I have some questions. I don't know if people are able to. Well, since folks don't have immediate questions, Marianne, I would like you to come off mute. Marianne is a community member of ours in the Illinois 7, works in the gun violence prevention space. And, we are talking about the topic of environmental justice. Can you tell us a little bit about the work you do with the community gardens and what effects you've seen it have on the actual community?
I can. First of all, I want to thank you for this because everything that you're talking about, all of it, the Compete Act is so important for the neighborhoods that I have this garden in, for one thing. So I have a garden in the Austin neighborhood. I don't have it. The garden is theirs. In the Austin neighborhood, and me and a bunch of volunteers manage it. We help them. We help get the garden going. It's a beautiful garden. It was not. It was a vacant lot. We went and saw about 20, 25 vacant lots that are in bad shape. And we were able to get this one. And it is at 4910 West Quincy. And there was nothing there for 20, 25 years. It was just a vacant lot. The grass was up to like my chest. We work together with an organization called Neighbor Space. They own about 130 lots in the Chicago neighborhood. And they own them and they keep the insurance on them and they help us clear it. And then we started working in it. So one of the things I want to say, it's in between two buildings. They house people with disabilities, low income, and seniors. And so this garden is now put together so that anyone with a disability can come in. We put in brick walkways for sure. We put in all the beds that we put them in high enough that people can sit on them, or work from their wheelchair or work from their canes. They can work in the garden. But what I've seen over this will be our third season of harvesting. And we have 10 beds now. We started out with two, and we have 10 beds now, and we have all kinds of things going on in there. We have um, uh, they call the Fireflies come in and sing for us. We have kids from a house in Austin that come into the garden and all different areas there. So there's so much to say about that. It's a beautiful space, but it wasn't. And no one could go out in that neighborhood. They couldn't go out in their front yards and play and run and ride their bikes. And now they can. And they say to me now, this is our backyard. So they come in either way. So this is their backyard. They come in there and they play and run and we pray together. The people it was set up for people with when we first started out by a woman named Bertha Purnell. And she lost her son in 2017 from gun violence. And her mission was to have a garden like this so that people could heal from trauma, heal from the trauma of what's happening to them in these neighborhoods. It's a beautiful space, but we also can bring in people that will teach them how to plant, how to grow. So now the food's coming. So now we feed food, we feed the whole neighborhood. They feed themselves. They plant and they do the work. But it takes money and it takes people to come in and volunteer in these places to do it. We work with grants. Some of the grants help us, but we're losing grants now because of what happened, all the federal grants that are taken away. So we rely sometimes on just donations, our fundraisers that we have and stuff. But the garden is so beautiful. And to see what's happened in the almost 4 years now, it's changed the block, it's changed 3 blocks over and 4 blocks down. That people just come in and they hang out and they talk to each other. And they're outside of their homes where they were staying inside of their homes and not even knowing each other. They're all coming in and gathering. So that is so important. And when you talk about people getting education, I mean, I see so many of the people that are in that space that would love to have some education on to do things with their hands, that they love, to work with tools and such. People with disabilities that come in and say to us, we have children there that are autistic, that we have people that come in and play with the kids that and help them. And so much goes on there. But we need that in every neighborhood, not just this neighborhood. And there is 130 throughout the Chicago area. I do know that there are some. But in the area that we're in, I think there's probably at least 8 lots that I know that are still vacant that don't need to be. And if there is money for that investment, it would change everyone's life there. I've learned so much from the community. Um, Coming in from Oak Park, we're only a mile away. I mean, these are our neighbors, so this isn't like, well, we need to work together. So that's what we're doing, is we're working together with our neighbors so that they can do the work in their community to grow and do more and do better for themselves.
So, Marianne, what would you say is the biggest obstacle of expanding this? Is it just the money, or is there anything else that you think a congressional office could do, maybe even in collaboration with other elected officials to continue to see this grow?
I think one thing is just to let that they would know about them and
Mm,
talk about them and give information to other people that, this is an important space because there are so many other big, beautiful, amazing organizations like Build there. It's amazing space. There's another Alt Space Chicago, another beautiful space, big, and those are big organizations to get the bigger grants.
mm.
I think what we need is to invest in these neighborhoods, in the neighborhoods, in these smaller gardens, because they're doing the work. They're the boots on the ground. They don't have a big structure, and so anything that can bring that the administration can bring in other people to teach about the different foods and how to cook them. And so I mean, they can just talk about it and let people know that this space is there. And I think that could bring in more people. Once they see it, some kids come in from some of the colleges. Once they come in and see it, they're like, oh, we're coming back all the time, and they do.
Okay.
So that's what I think could happen. I mean, I think bringing just the fact that they're there, telling people what they can do to help the neighborhoods grow would be incredible to me. And I know you're having like a cleanup, some one time, and I love those. I think they're so good and we need those so many bad. But what we need them to do too is after it's cleaned up to stay there,
That's
not to just clean up and leave and say, okay, we cleaned up your house today, but we're not going to come back for a year,
that's
or
right.
whatever. The constant work in the neighborhoods.
Well, I love that. And here's my final thing, because this is you just had me thinking about this, Marianne, as you were speaking. What is the opportunity for a multi-generational coalition to be built through these community gardens? Because gardening in itself, it reminds me of my grandmother. right? But when I was a child, I was like, can I do that? I thought that was just things that adults did. But then my grandmother would be like, nope, grab this, grab this, and come over here and shovel this up. And it really is an opportunity to build across different demographics to do it. But I particularly think older and younger people because you typically think of gardening as an older thing.
Right.
But do you see opportunities there and in what ways?
Oh, sure. I mean, the elders that come in from the community teach these children how to put their hands in the dirt. They teach them what to do. They'll kids will start digging and digging and they'll say, "That's good, but now here's what I want you to do." And they'll go, "Oh." And then they come back and learn. They come back and learn. Some of them have never planted anything ever. And now they're growing their own veg. They come back and they say, "Is it there yet?" And then they take it home and they feed it. I mean, they cook it. They take it home to their houses and they cook it. But
Wow.
integer, oh, so many different ages. I mean, I think the oldest lady that was in there probably was me. But then over that there was a woman there in her mid 80s, I want to say, and she sits on the side there and she teaches the children how to like take onions and grab them together, tie them up and pull them out. And they're like, whoa, that's so cool. So they're learning from each other and they just get to learn from each other, where the elders are teaching the younger people how to even interact with each other,
Okay.
to share.
I
Hmm.
love that. I love that affirmation too because I do remember that. Tiffany said, "Do you still need workers for the garden?"
Always. I
Marianne, if you want to drop your email in there or any
will.
contact
I
information,
will.
Tiffany, it'd be good for you to connect with Marianne.
Mhm.
So before we leave, because I know we're coming up 10 minutes on time,
Great.
does anybody have any other pressing questions that they would like to ask? But this is why I love doing this because we make these connections, these community connections about all this amazing work. And I just have to say that the great thing about Illinois 7 is we do not need to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
We have amazing organizers, community members, I mean, amazing organizations who are on the ground. They have their pulse, their finger on the pulse of the community. And this is really about our getting a representative who's going to leverage our government to bring the resources back so people can do their jobs. When I think of a lot of the work that I, started in, which was violence prevention work, people were overworked and underpaid. But the creativity, the curiosity on how to solve violence, the heart to do it was abundant. It was there, and the people are there. We just need to make sure that we're investing in the right thing. So, Nicole, in that pre-submitted question that you had, that someone had about what concessions should we make? Let's concede going to war. Let's concede giving tax breaks for millionaires and billionaires who are not paying their fair share in taxes. And I'm not talking about people who just make six figures. I'm talking about the 1/10 of the 1% in this country who own 99% of the wealth in this nation. And they only got that wealth because of working class people building up their corporations or their companies, and they should be giving back. We should want to invest in the future of our district through education and our young people, giving them the quality of life that we could have only dreamed of. We should, be clamoring to pull in our immigrant community and our immigrant siblings to work alongside us in things like community gardens in these jobs. It does not have to be a competition between Black folks and immigrants. The decision should be, should working class people be paying more in taxes or should a millionaire and billionaire pay more in taxes? That should be the decision that we have to make and choose from. And so I believe that firmly. I don't come from a prestigious political background. My parents are also manufacturing union workers. And my dad just retired this past year. And my father, he he kept the same job for the last 30 something years. It's unheard of now. It is unheard of. Um, yeah, I mean, it's unheard of now. And he was able to keep that job, and now he's retired. And we have to deal with an administration talking about snatching his Social Security. No, absolutely not. Not on our watch. That is the stance that we have to take. And so, I'm just very grateful that you all sat in once again on this conversation about environmental justice and AI. And thank you, Marianne, for chiming in on things like the community gardens. But I think that in areas like Illinois 7 that we deal with food deserts and medical apartheid, we could really use, I mean, we could pull grant money from the USDA to help us plant and grow and through urban farming, through the community garden. So you're 100% correct about us getting the funding that we need for things like that. But I am gonna, end it now because we're up on time. But I thank everybody so much for, and just one last call. Did anybody else have any questions before we get off? Going once? Going twice? Okay, good. I just want to remind everybody, please text three friends to go to the polls. Early voting has started in all 50 wards and in the western suburbs. So you have from now until March 16th to early vote. If you have a mail-in ballot, get it in this week. Get it in this week. They've changed the rules about postal service and postmarking, and so you don't want your ballot to be invalidated. Make sure you get that in this week, and make sure you spread the word about that. And Marianne, did you have anything
No,
else?
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Um, Thank you all so much for coming, and we will send a follow-up email. And Marianne was very gracious to put her contact information in there. We will send that in the follow-up for anybody that wants to volunteer in the community gardens that are happening. And y'all have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Nicole, did you want to end it? Marianne's trying to hang out. Yeah.